Years passed, and the storm that had once torn John's world apart became a distant horizon. The pain never vanished completely, scars never do, but it softened, faded into something he could carry without stumbling under its weight. He often thought of his life as a book, the first chapters filled with naive hope, then the cruel pages of betrayal, and now, slowly, a new section being written in calmer, steadier lines. John dedicated himself fully to raising his daughter. She grew before his eyes, from a little girl clutching his hand tightly to a young woman with her own dreams and ambitions. He was there for her first school play, her first broken heart, her first victory on the soccer field. Each moment reminded him that although he had lost one version of a family, he had gained something equally precious, a bond with his child that was unshakable, forged in hardship and nurtured with love. He worked hard, sometimes more than he should have, but he also learned balance. He no longer chased overtime just to distract himself from emptiness. Instead, he spent weekends hiking with his daughter, cooking together, or simply talking about life. These conversations taught him as much as they taught her. He realized that even when life betrays you, you can still choose to live with integrity. He wanted her to grow up seeing that strength does not mean never falling, it means rising every time you do. But John's journey was not only about fatherhood. Slowly, he began to rediscover himself as a man outside the roles of husband or father. He took up running in the mornings, joined a local community group that helped restore old houses, and even began writing down his thoughts in a journal. What started as scattered notes turned into long reflections about love, loss, and resilience. Writing became a kind of therapy, a way to turn chaos into order, sorrow into meaning. There were still moments when loneliness knocked at his door. Sometimes, when he saw other couples holding hands or families laughing in restaurants, a part of him ached. Yet instead of bitterness, he felt something different, gratitude. He had once believed happiness depended on one person, on one promise. Now he understood it was something deeper, the ability to find light even in the darkest corners. Years later, when his daughter left for college, John faced another silence in the house. It was not the heavy silence of betrayal, but a gentler one, filled with echoes of laughter, footsteps, and memories. He stood in her empty room one evening, smiling through the ache in his chest. He realized he had given her wings, and now it was time to let her fly. It was during this period that John allowed himself to open up to new connections. Not in the desperate search for someone to replace what was lost, but with the calm heart of a man who had learned to stand on his own. He met people through community projects, through friends, and slowly, cautiously, through the world of companionship. And though he remained careful with his trust, he no longer carried the weight of fear. He knew that even if love failed again, he had already proven he could survive, rebuild, and keep moving forward. More importantly, John began to share his story. At first, it was just with close friends, then at small community gatherings, and eventually at local events where people spoke about resilience. To his surprise, people listened with deep attention. Many saw themselves in his words, the betrayal, the loneliness, the struggle to keep going. Some came up to him afterward, thanking him for putting into words the pain they had never been able to express. John realized that his suffering had not been meaningless. It had given him the gift of empathy, the ability to reach into another person's silence and say, I know. I've been there. And you will come out stronger too. That realization filled him with a sense of purpose greater than any he had ever known. By the time he was older, John no longer thought of himself as the man who had been betrayed. That chapter, though painful, was simply part of the larger story. He now saw himself as a survivor, a father, a mentor, and above all, a man who had chosen to remain kind even when life had been cruel. One evening, sitting on his porch as the sun sank into the horizon, John wrote in his journal. Life broke me once, but it also rebuilt me. I learned that love is not about holding on to someone, it's about holding on to hope, to kindness, to the will to keep giving even when the world takes away. My story isn't about what I lost. It's about what I became. And with those words, John closed the notebook, took a deep breath of the evening air, and smiled. Because at last, he understood that every ending, no matter how bitter, is only a doorway to another beginning.